Welcome to another episode of Vivid Noise, and today's first and main talking point is Sonic Adventure 2. Now, would it be strange if I called this one of my favorite video games of all time? Not just 3D platformer, not just Sonic game. This is the whole package. When I think of just an incredibly fun experience that a video game can provide, I think of this and very few others, which is really interesting actually from a, I guess, I don't want to say psychological standpoint, but you think that, it would be Adventure 1, or specifically Adventure DX, or Heroes, when it comes to 3D platformers, that is. But no, it's still this one. I played this game probably like a decade after the other two I just mentioned. But this, man, where do I even begin? Before, you'd think I'd start with the music, but you know what? Fuck it. Let's start with the music. Okay, so I've noticed that, I don't want to say the general argument, because I'm not gonna lie, I'm not super in touch when it comes to the popular Sonic opinions. I haven't watched a video by any of like the big Sonic opinion guys in a pretty long time, but I noticed that the general consensus when it comes to Sonic Adventure 2 is it's got a bang soundtrack, like most Sonic games, but the general variety in the music isn't quite as good as Adventure 1. And it's true, Adventure 1's soundtrack definitely leans more towards creating a sense of presence in the world, and it has a much greater genre variety. I mean, we got jazz, we got I don't know, hard rock, we got some elements of pop, we got some really interesting stuff going on, like fusions of genres. No, not fusion itself. This game has fusion, actually. Is that what you call it? Rouge's theme song, basically, because it's not really like a jazz song, but it's not jazz, so I guess you just call it fusion. But with Adventure 1, you just got this really interesting mix of different musical elements. I can think of, off the top of my head, what was it? A Red Mountain with with those really cool piano parts, that Mixolydian thing going on, and that freaking sick bridge section. Is that what you call it? A bridge section for an instrumental song? It's fucking amazing. It's just 2 chords, I think, but on top of that, like Jun, what he's doing with the horns, that's great. But I found that overall, I consider Sonic Adventure 2's soundtrack to just be so much more, well, I don't want to say it's more musical, because that sounds stupid. They're both music, they're both fucking great. But Adventure 2's soundtrack is very, very singable. There's almost not a single piece of music on this OST I can't start singing the lead melody to. You see, with Adventure 1, there's a lot of stuff that's not necessarily atmospheric. I wouldn't really call any of Adventure 1's soundtrack atmospheric, but it does have a stronger emphasis on interesting rhythms and just these strange sort of movements and changes, and not necessarily just a strong lead melody, which isn't a bad thing. You don't need a strong lead melody to create a great piece of music, especially for a video game. I'd argue that as someone who has actually dabbled in composing music for a project that, I don't know if it's ever going to come out. I can't really reveal too many behind the scenes things, but the guy making it is one of my friends, and he's like super busy. But with that little bit of experience I have with composing video game music, and from listening to tons of video game OSTs, I mean, it's something I grew up on more than quote-unquote normal music. I noticed that melody isn't always in the forefront. Sometimes it is more important to just create create an exciting sound that supports what's happening in front of you. It's almost like your character is the lead instrument. That sounds really stupid, but that is kind of how it works, really. You ever listen to a lot of video game OSTs, and sometimes the emphasis isn't on the melody. It's more on just what's going on overall in the music. But with Adventure 2, every song sings. The guitars sing. Rouge's themes literally have singing. and Knuckles. Oh man, Knuckles. Bars, man, bars. They're so okay. They're pretty cheesy, but unironically, there's some like genuinely good. I don't really listen to that kind of music anymore. I, embarrassingly enough, used to make it. Some of you guys may know, but it genuinely is really well produced. And God, Tomoyo Tani, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. His instrumentals are just My god, okay, you're hearing one of them right now, actually. This one's a little more, well, it's like a do-do-do. You got this, like, kind of, I don't know if it's bluesy. I don't know if I can call it blues. I would have to actually study and figure out if it's doing, like, the right scale for it and stuff. But overall, it's just, every song just has a really unique feel. I really love the lead synth part in Meteor Herd. It kind of reminds me of Gimme by ABBA, weirdly enough. I don't even know if it's in the same key. That doesn't really matter. Well, no, I find that generally normies gravitate towards, that sounds very pretentious, I know, but like as a music guy, it's like, people who don't really get music, they will usually tell you you're playing something wrong if it's in the wrong key. Even if everything is relative to the piece of music correct. So let's say you transpose the entire song down and some people will still be like, wait, that sounds off. You know, because you've transposed it, likely to fit your vocal range, fit the range of the instrument. Holy shit, that was fast. I just finished the stage. Well, I guess I'm not gonna have to do much defending the Knuckles and Rouge stages. I'm obviously gonna go over them still and talk about why I believe they're an improvement over the original and such, and all the playstyles and all that stuff. I just want to be a little more structured here, so let's just finish my point regarding the music, then we'll move on. But as far as actual variety goes in the music, I still believe there's plenty of variety, and not just in the sense that, well, specifically Knuckles and Rouge's themes have tons of different varied instrumentation and musical techniques and chord progressions and such. I mean, it's the kind of music where I can't just listen to it and tell you what's happening. I would have to open up YouTube, set the speed to 0.25, pick up my guitar, and go and like sing every individual note in all of the chords to even have a chance of figuring out what the hell's going, especially in Rouge's songs. Knuckles is major, you know, fucking F major 7, go to C major 7, a little bit of E. Something really weird happens during a death chamber. We'll get to that one later. I still have, I don't know, it sounds like A, like doing like a sus2 thing going on. It's weird. Someone's probably gonna correct me about that. I don't know. It's one of those songs. It's the kind where you're not even sure if it's correct until you've spent probably 5 hours studying the first 2 chord changes. But that's well, no, it's not jazz, but it definitely, that's the funny thing. It's like hip hop actually has tons of insane chord movements, which I know that people usually making it don't think about it, but I think about it. I think it's cool. Ironically enough, now that I'm more educated when it comes to music, I feel like I could actually make better hip-hop music than I would make, like, I don't know, because I like writing, you know, more pop-rocky kind of stuff, like the outro song that you heard. I might switch it up. I do have some other demos and stuff written out that are just these simple loops that would work really well for an outro theme. Maybe I'll keep it the same for this one. I do want to establish the piece of music I've written right now as the main outro. Maybe I'll change it up for the occasional special kind of game that I'm doing. Maybe it's like a especially long episode or some anniversary episode, wherever it might be. Yeah, back on track. So I was talking about variety, and I believe that Adventure 2's soundtrack, even if it doesn't sound obvious, there's actually tons of musical variety within the individual styles. Like, for example, with Eggman, let's just say Eggman's themes. They're not just industrial metal, because, well, one, I don't really hear any metal in their sound at all, but it's not just that. There's a lot of interesting elements going on with the textures. It definitely is partially industrial because of all the electronics, and there's just this really great groove to all of the songs, but they all have a very distinct sound thanks to, again, the very strange sort of moments that happen in them. Like, what was it, hidden bass? No, it was Sand Ocean. It's basically Eggman's hidden bass in a way. That's the one that just had this really strange sort of moment in it. I can't really tell you from like a music theory standpoint what it even is. I would have to listen to it again. I've completely forgotten about it, really. It's not very intuitive musically. It's not the kind of thing where I can listen to it and my ear just instantly tells me, oh, well, you see, it's going to the 5 chord here. No, I have no idea. It's not like, what was it, Lost Colony? Lost Colony is pretty simple. There's a bit of Dorian, a little bit of chromaticism there. That's typical Jun shit from like the early 2000s. Yeah, and when it comes to Tales' music, while we're still on the mech stages, I love how it's this mix of this very Japanese flavor, obviously, of pop rock, pop punk, kind of. There's just these really cool, very nostalgic chord progressions. I love how you can tell that I'm not actually using the Lightspeed dash, even though this is like my 5th take of the stage. I did a lot of takes for this playthrough because either I wasn't happy with it, or I don't know, the recording curse. I guess it's a real thing. I would always hear about it in Let's Plays, but I didn't actually take it as being a real phenomenon in recording. But genuinely, yeah, I fucking, what was it? Aquatic Mind gave me serious shit during this recording session. You're gonna see my lives counter fluctuate a lot during this playthrough, and I can't be fucked to edit it. No, I don't think it would even be possible unless I did some seriously good pen tool work. But yeah, what I love especially about Tales' stages is that not only do they have the that like pop rock element, but they'll occasionally have these new metal parts. I'm not even kidding. A hidden bass has just this fucking Linkin Park, early Linkin Park type riff, and it's so cool. And like the harmonics and the electronic elements, and less emphasized than with Eggman. And it's especially impressive considering that the soundtrack for, I imagine the music for Tales' Stages was kind of rushed. You know, they say you can't rush art, but man, that's some art. It's really good. Because obviously Tails wasn't going to be playable initially. You all know the story, right? I'm sure that you're familiar with the whole... Oh, it was supposed to be Tails. It was supposed to be Sonic, Knuckles, and Eggman. That would have been really strange. I'm glad they went with the configuration they did. It pleases my OCD that it's this symmetrical. I mean, imagine if we had Sonic, Knuckles, and Eggman, and we had those 3 playstyles, but it was like, okay, well, what about the rest of the characters? That would have worked too, because it still covers the 3 main styles. But, okay, back to the music. Where was I? Shadow. Man, Shadow has an awesome sound in this. I adore that sort of really weird, again, these drum and bass moments mixed with industrial, mixed with rock. It's interesting how future games sort of rewrote Shadow's sound as just sort of being electronic metal in a way. But really, it's got a very heavy emphasis on industrial. And actually, I think Shadow the Hedgehog, the game I did an hour-and-a-half long video on, like an hour-and-a-half heavily edited video. Like this kind of video is also an hour long, but, well, it's still going to take some work to do. I can see a lot of editing ahead of me right now, but it's not going to be the same kind of undertaking. I'm not going to spend a whole summer on it like I did with the Shadow video. But anyway, that game also had a pretty decent amount of electronic industrial elements in the background music for the most part. A lot of people say, oh, it's so notoriously guitar-driven, but, well, yeah, it is guitar-driven, but it has a lot of interesting electronica and glitchiness and weird scales, and this game does that too. I really love Shadow's sound, especially Final Chase. That's such a weird song, and in a way, I'm almost glad that some of the stages that were supposed to belong to Sonic, and you can kind of tell by the music, ended up going to Shadow because the music kind of balances it out. Because Shadow does have these more just typical punk rock, sort of hard rock sort of sounds. Okay, no, there's no hard rock in any of Sonic's sound. If you look, okay, I get really snobby, I get really pretentious when it comes to this stuff, but there's zero hard rock in most of this game's sound. In fact, something that really, really pisses me off, that I probably shouldn't say because I think some people might try and use that. Who the fuck's gonna use that? No one's that petty. Basically, when people call Crush 40 butt rock, look, they're not butt rock. They do a little experiment. Look up Egypt Central Over and Under. Then look up Live and Learn. Those 2 songs use the exact same 4 chords and are in the exact same key. Listen to both of them back to back and tell me which one is butt rock, right? I don't think I need to... They're like, at worst, I guess you could say they're progressive butt rock. But really, they're just, I think they're progressive rock. Their sound definitely changed a little bit over time. It got a little bit simpler in like the earlier sort of, early to mid 2010s. They were definitely more progressive early on, but that's just how it goes generally. I find that with a lot of musicians, including myself, you sort of, as you're still a little younger, you are really excited by different kinds of, chordal movements and, interesting little melody parts that counteract each other and stuff like that. And that's really fun, but then you start to realize, yeah, but how about writing a memorable song? And to be fair, all of Crush 40 songs are memorable as hell. They were great at writing stuff that, and still are honestly, at writing stuff that is technical, but not insane. It's not some shreddy shit, but it's very tastefully done. I do believe Jun just has that taste in his playing. So anyway, back to Shadow. What I was talking about is that I do enjoy the fact that they ended up reusing some of those Sonic songs because it balances it out, you know, because, what was it? Industrial and a drum and bass mixed with guitars can get pretty abrasive. So just having some straightforward, I don't know what you want to call it, straightforward, just Japanese punk rock, J-punk, whatever you want to call it, because it really is very different to American style music. Some people have described just Sonic music in general during this time as American cheese. Really? American cheese? No, no, that's not how it works, but, I mean, the songs aren't even written by an American. That's, whatever. God, I sound so autistic when I talk about this stuff, but really, it is something I'm genuinely passionate about, and that's why I'm doing this series. It's an outlet for what I find interesting, and hopefully you guys find interesting too. Let's just, oh fuck it, let's just do it. Like, let's get to Sonic's music. Really, it is just, it's so fucking tasteful. All of it, I already said, it's a very important thing when you're writing music. It's taste. It's making it something that works well with everything happening within the music itself, and nothing is trying to just exist for its own sake. While I don't necessarily think that Escape for the City is a ska punk song necessarily, it has, you know, upstrokes, fucking clean guitar upstrokes. Yes, that equals ska. But no, it really is just it's a total early 2000s anthem. Early 2000s, but in like the bright, cheery sort of way, because usually when I think of early 2000s music, I generally think of shit like Cold and Crossfade, what else? Linkin Park, dun 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 dun, dun. You know, that kind of stuff, which I did mention had a bit of an influence on this game as well. How could it not? Hybrid Theory was a fucking massive album. In fact, those guys, even after, you know, Chester's passing, they're still incredibly popular, and they could probably not release any new music for another 50 years and still be huge. Okay, maybe 50 years is a little optimistic, but their impact was just insane. But getting back on track, yeah, there's still tons of variety within just Sonic songs. I really, really love a Pyramid Cave. I feel like it's incredibly underrated instrumental song from, well, you can't really say instrumental song, that's a paradox, but instrumental piece from, you know, just Freddy Sonic's career. It's just so damn, it's not dark, but it has just these really cool, you know, obviously these chromatic pad sections, and the steel drums are a really nice little touch. That little James Bond bass line at the end, dun, 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 it's simple. A lot of it is very simple. The most complex it gets is during that key change, when it goes to F sharp, and it plays this F sharp major, no, is it just an F natural major 7? Damn it, I have to play it, but I'm not about to play guitar with my mic not set up for recording guitar. It's just gonna sound like ass. I'd rather spare you that. But whatever, it's this chromatic climb down from back into the root note of E, because the song's ultimately E, but it does borrow a little bit from Phrygian. And yeah, it's just such an awesome song. Again, the lead playing on it is just so singable. You can sing that melody all day long. Do 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 do. It's perfect. It's super pentatonic for the most part, but it makes it memorable, and it fits. It's really fitting for how the stage sort of flows. Oh, Crazy Gadget. Now that level is just fucking nuts. This weird thing, Jun loves to play it. I noticed it in the intro for the game too, but it's in G instead of in A. Okay, well, it's not really... I don't actually remember. The song starts in A, I think, and does this sort of... it starts on a G4, but doesn't matter, nerd shit. But it's just this really simple sort of perfect fourth tritone sort of a climb down. You know what I'm talking about. You don't even need to know music to know what I'm talking about. That weird part when the guitar goes down and all jumpy and stuff. which is again really fitting for the stage, although it's nowhere near as confusing as a lot of people say that it is. I do agree with what was his name? Zoom Zyke, I think his name was, the guy who does breakdowns of like Mario and Sonic levels and stuff. Yeah, it's just, no, I'm not saying get good, because that isn't usually a great argument, but I don't know, maybe it's just because before I played this game for the first time, I watched many a playthrough of it, as you do before you can actually play a game for yourself. You watch other people play it, and I watched the old Super Game Bros playthrough before it got deleted. I think it got deleted. I can't find it anywhere. Yeah, I think I watched Brain Scratch and Clement and all that, and they would always take this very specific pathway at the end of the stage, so I never got lost. I just memorized that pathway and just, oh, that's how you do it. That's how you go through that part of the stage. Final Rush is really cool. It's kind of funky. I know it sounds weird, but like to me, that's sort of do-do-do-do-do-do. It sounds kind of funky to me. I don't know. It's just sort of the intervals that it uses. And you know, what else can I say about Live and Learn that hasn't been said a billion times? It's an incredible song, and it really does somehow overcome the odds of it being a, well, yeah, it's labeled as butt rock. And I guess if you were to call any Crush 40 song butt rock, well, no, that still wouldn't be the most accurate example, because actually some of their newer stuff is a little closer to that. I don't want to call it that, but it shares a little more in common with that sort of era of alternative hard rock and stuff like that. But Live and Learn is just, you know, it's a 4-chord song, but man, it uses it, well, it's not just 4 chords, it has like the flat 6 and flat 7, and Japanese stuff, right? The Japanese do it all the time. But it's just, the lead part is perfect. It's got all these layered guitars during the verses, and an absolutely perfectly written chorus. The call and response, the gang vocals, that ridiculously hooky melody, you know, hanging on the edge of tomorrow. I would sing it like full voice, but I've got my mic set up for recording voiceover, so it would clip like a motherfucker. Yeah, it's just an incredibly good song. I don't even know if it's Crush 40's best, really, but it's their iconic song. It's what both Jun and Johnny will be remembered for. You know, I almost kind of feel bad because Hardline is a band that's been going on for a very, very long time, and I know that Johnny's very passionate about it, and his brother and everything. I think his brother was in the band. But no, this is what they're going to be remembered for, these guys, and rightfully so. I think it's an incredible piece of music. Most of Crush 40's catalog is anyway. I mean, who can forget freaking the nostalgia bomb that is Sonic Heroes? It's so fucking good. But yeah, what's interesting is that typical actually for a lot of successful songs, or at least a lot of the best songs by a certain band, not even Johnny himself said that he liked it all that much. I know Jun, he knew that it was going to be great, but I believe that I saw an interview where Johnny said that he really wasn't 100% sure about it. And, I don't know, maybe he was going through his 4-chord song suck phase. We all have that, right? We try to avoid it. And it's funny how I say that as if I'm like some super experienced musician. I've been making music for less than 5 years, really. But still, in those 5 years, you learn a lot. Also, yes, I took damage there because the shortcut, nice. I don't actually know if it saves any time. You know, some speedrunner will tell me that it would have been faster. It's just BLJ for a different part. Actually, there is a sort of equivalent to that in this game. There's this move where Sonic like does this like hyper bounce or something like that, where you spam the button at the right angle and whatever. And I also love how they use the Live and Learn motif. This is something that a lot of Sonic games do. Actually, it's just a common thing in video games, really. But it uses the Live and Learn motif for all the menus and stuff, and different variations of it at different tempos, different lead parts on top, just the riff, or just this rhythm section, or just these different parts that allows you to really experience the song in all of these fresh sort of ways. And that's pretty much all I have when it comes to the soundtrack. It's just amazing. Oh, I don't really talk about Rouge's music too much. It's because I don't listen to that kind of music. It's great. It really is very well made, perfectly sung. I don't know how much pitch correction there was. That doesn't matter. Like, the auto-tune debate is stupid. It's like, it's a tool. You use it to make good music. Who cares? Like, you can't make yourself, you can't auto-tune your way into singing well. You still have to sing it well. It just makes it a little more in key. It's that extra little bit of polish. It's just like quantization, I guess, for a drum performance. It's like if you can't fucking keep the beat, no amount of click, 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 no amount of that is gonna fix it. You might as well just reprogram the fucking drums. But anyway, that's irrelevant right now. And Knuckles' songs, man, I already talked about them. I freaking love it. They're corny as hell, but at the same time, they're memorable. Again, very memorable. This whole soundtrack is ridiculously memorable. Now, let's move on to something that more people can actually relate to, and that being actual gameplay aspects. So I want to talk about the playstyles. I think Sonic Team made a very good move, and not enough people really bring this up, I feel, in their reviews of this game. It's to do with the fact that basically what they did was they just took the free playstyles from Sonic Adventure 1 that I guess worked best. I mean, no, don't get me wrong. I'm pretty sure everyone would have liked it if Adventure 2 was just the Sonic levels, and that's fine. But the thing is, the Sonic levels are, I believe, the reason why for Adventure 1, I'm sure they had all of these levels played through as multiple characters, primarily just to show off, like, hey, look at all these new characters in 3D, look what we can do. With Adventure 2, I think they realized the production cost of modern Sonic stages. Really, because yes, that was much earlier on and games were cheaper to develop overall, but I doubt that it would have been cheap or easy on the hardware to make such big levels for Sonic and Shadow to run through, really. You gotta have some smaller stages in between that, which are much easier to handle. And okay, yes, Knuckles and Rouge's stages can be quite large, especially Mad Space, but they're generally just these singular instance areas. They're not these massive sort of roller coasters being loaded constantly. I don't really know much about game development, to be fair, but still, there must have been some reason behind Sonic Adventure 2 having these multiple playstyles, and maybe there were just some people who really dug Gamma. I like Gamma's gameplay, although I do believe, and this is going to lead me onto this point, that Adventure 2 really just took the Sonic, and I guess Tails, well, not really Tails, no, just the Sonic, Knuckles, and Gamma gameplay, and just took them to, I guess, their logical extreme, or at least logical extreme without mods, because, you know, when it comes to games, like, you can always go a step further with a certain mechanic with mods and kind of level design and stuff like that. It's all just the logical extreme of what could be viable for a commercial product of that time, let's just say, and for the hardware, that is. But they did the most they could with these gameplay styles, and there were some changes that were polarizing, like, for example, the decision to quote-unquote butcher Knuckles and Rouge's radars, but I'm not sure. See, I feel like we ultimately benefited because of the better hint system. See, because the hint system in Adventure 1 was, go here, stupid, which, to be fair, when I was a little kid, not even that helped, because sometimes she would go through walls, and it's kind of hard to, even now, it's hard to figure out where exactly you need to go when it's like, this way, and she clips into the fucking rock in Red Mountain, and it's like, okay, what way? Okay, like, this sort of direction, but you're gone. I don't know what you meant by this way exactly. Like, go through the rock? I know, just fly around it or something, but it's a little bit vague. It's also not rewarding. You know, it's just the game kind of gives it to you, which I guess if you just want to get it done with, but it shows a lack of confidence in the gameplay style. And I'm sure that the developers were really prioritizing Sonic for Adventure 1. In fact, if I were to do a playthrough of the game for this series, in fact, I've even got the thumbnails ready, I would probably just play through Sonic's campaign and leave it at that, because that is what I consider to be the Sonic Adventure 1 experience. Everything else is extra. I think I had a little bit of a rant at the end of my long-ass Shadow video. You don't even have to watch the whole thing. Just find that video and skip to, like, the very end. It's the last chapter of the video, essentially, if you want to hear me talk about that a little bit more. But essentially what I meant was the last chapter of pretty much any Sonic game doesn't really have much value to me, and I see no real point in getting to it. I do get to it with this game because both campaigns are really good, although I do prefer the Hero campaign, and I'll talk about that later if I remember to do so, but I've never seen it as a necessity, really, to complete almost any games. In fact, I'm actually going to start to apply that mentality to this series, because I really feel that having to complete an arbitrary amount of a game for it to be an episode of this series would really limit what games I'm able to cover. And going over some of my favorite content creators, they very rarely complete the games they play. They'll either start a Let's Play and never finish it, or just do these singular episodes where it's just like a certain portion of the game, and that's totally fine. In this instance, I'm doing the whole hero campaign because I love it. But for Adventure 1, for example, I would just do the Sonic campaign, really. It's long enough as it is. For Heroes, I'd just do Team Sonic, which I used to call it Team Hero because I thought it had the same logic as Adventure 2. Or with any other game that really wouldn't lend itself to full completion, I would just play a given portion of it, maybe for 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it might be, and just call it a video. Because really, it's all very arbitrary. Okay, let's see if we can make it all the way back to the main talking point, which was the multiple playstyles. Yeah, Knuckles and Rouge's playstyle, because I don't have to talk about the Sonic playstyle. It's the one from Adventure 1, but with more dynamic, more action-packed stages. Sonic's got a couple more abilities. The light speed dash is a godsend. Best freaking thing they ever added into a 3D Sonic, to a 3D platformer, period. It's amazing. But I'm probably going to spend way longer talking about the ones that there's a little more to talk about, those being Tails and Eggman and Knuckles and Rouge. I'll start with Knuckles and Rouge. I may or may not have already talked about the gimped radar, but I'm going to go into a little more detail. So yeah, the reason why I feel like the gimped radar is more of a benefit than a hindrance, I believe it's twofold. For one, you feel like a fucking god when you find a piece without the game telling you to. In fact, one of my favorite things to do is to, after I've played a certain level enough, I like to visit what I call hotspots. Essentially just areas of the map where the game is just very likely to spawn an emerald piece. Doesn't matter if the game tells you about it, it's probably going to be there. And chances are, it is there. It's just really fun to just sort of outsmart the game in that way. And obviously it's that satisfaction you get when you get the piece beforehand. It's just, I don't know, it's so cathartic. When you don't see it on your radar, you just see it floating around and you get that perfect with the rainbow and stuff. That's awesome. But another thing is the hint system. I imagine they could have made it work if they made it a little more elaborate with the original radar, that is. As in maybe they had you, I don't know, maybe seek out differently colored monitors for hints, or when you select a hint, it asks you for, piece 1, 2, or 3. I feel like that would have been adding a little bit too much to it. I feel like this were like, if Sonic Adventure 2 were some weird PC exclusive of the time, maybe then it would have happened, because they tend to be a lot more complex, generally, because, mouse and keyboard and all that. Although it's not something that you couldn't do on the Dreamcast. I just find that it's a tendency with that era of PC gaming. Nowadays, it's all homogenous, just like, hey, it's on PC, it's on console. Apart from like RTSs and stuff, those you don't really see too much on console just because of the interface. Even still, the hint system, the way that it works, really is rewarding in of itself. I do find a lot of enjoyment in knowing the levels well enough that from just the tiniest little push in a certain direction, I already know where to look. It can take a while, and sometimes it can also depend on the translation, because while the game generally translates, well enough from Japanese to English, this was the 2000s after all, the early 2000s, but still, we were that era of jank-ass translations was generally long gone, at least when it came to the coherence of the script. The voice acting, that still had a bit of a way to go, although I love the voice acting in this game. I think it's one of the most, I want to say it's the most iconic Sonic voice cast out for me, that my generation, I guess. That would have to be the 4Kids cast. But I feel like it's incredibly fitting. Ryan Drummond is great as Sonic in this. He kind of lightened up his voice a little bit compared to how it was in Adventure 1, where it was just sort of like, "You big drip, where are you going?" Okay, it wasn't quite that distorted, but you get the idea. He lightened up a lot more. Tails, I'm not gonna lie, for a kid actor, obviously a professional, proper actor would have done a better job objectively, but I feel like the kid who voiced him, I don't know his name, I think he was the brother of the guy who voiced him in Adventure 1. He did a really good job for not just his age, but the fact that he probably had very limited direction, because it was that era still of video game voice acting, and it really does sell Tails' character. I feel like the inflection is just right, and those lines are iconic, like the way he delivers, Okay, that very particular inflection, it's fantastic. Obviously, Rouge's voice actress does a great job. Amy sounds like Amy. I don't have much to. I'm mainly concerned with the characters you actually play as because you hear their quotes all the time. And Dean Bristow is, yeah, he's godly as Eggman. Rest in peace. Although Mike Pollock is obviously a great replacement as well. Who is, I can't believe he's still going strong. Like, he's still with us in terms of, obviously, he's still alive. I wasn't expecting him to pass away that quickly, but what I mean is, he's still in the franchise, because with the rest of the voice actors, they get changed all the damn time. I was half expecting Ben Schwartz, I think, to take over for the games as well, not just the movie. But no, Mike Pollock's still, doing the voice, and, it's still great. But Dean Bristow, man, he was so menacing, and he had just so many iconic... Again, just a lot of this game was just purely iconic. Yosh! Those kind of sounds. Although, it's interesting because I imagine that's a leftover from the Japanese audio, except that totally sounds like Dean Bristow. I don't know, maybe it is, maybe he just happens to sound... Maybe the Japanese voice actor, happens to sound almost identical to Dean, but it doesn't. It almost sounds like Dean himself recorded those Japanese lines. And I actually remember seeing an interview with Ryan Drummond, who said that there was the directors, half of them were Japanese. There were some English directors in there as well, but there were also some Japanese ones, and he wanted him to make these very Japanese-specific sounds when climbing a ladder. So maybe some of that stayed in. Maybe there are some more Japanese-directed sounds for the English voice acting. Oh, and Knuckles. Oh, dude, Knuckles. He's just... Scott Dreer just did a great job with that sort of low-key, really chill sort of delivery. But he's really serious. He kind of hams it up for Heroes. Although Heroes had some great voice acting. In fact, I think overall, professionally, Heroes was the peak of this voice cast. Unsurprisingly, because it was the last game to use them. Okay, technically it was Advanced Free, I think. But that just reused a bunch of voice samples and stuff. It doesn't really... No, I think some of them were unique, but it's a fucking GBA game. Whatever. It's not the same thing as like a fully voice acted game. And David Humphrey as Shadow. I love that slightly lighter tone of voice he has. My heart is always going to belong to Jason Griffith's interpretation. It's just so fucking edgy, so dark. I remember back when I was in that community I used to talk about, I was actually casted as Shadow, or maybe I think I forced myself into that project. I'm not sure, and I totally just try to mimic Jason Griffith. I feel so bad for the guy who had to do the mix for that, because how do you mix that kind of voice in music? Oh, to be fair, Trust Company exists. Oh, they used to. Well, they're still together. They still play, and their vocalist has this very this breathy kind of. Let me think. What was it? Fall back on me. That kind of sound, which I found kind of cringy, but it's also pretty endearing, and it's a very unique sound, I gotta admit. It can be pretty raw when in the right musical context. Okay, I just figured out, I just listened to some of my recording, and I realized where I was going. The hint system, the translations, it works surprisingly well. There are moments when I feel like it's a bit of a stretch, what they say and what they expect you to find, but I can't really expect that much better. It was 2001 after all, but it's doable. And the hints get more and more obvious the more you use them, and it's still definitely possible to get a decent score. Maybe not an A rank easily unless you're really fast around the level, but you're not gonna guarantee yourself an E rank if you use more than a few hints. Really, I've had runs where I've used I think every single hint and gotten like a B, just because I was able to cut down on time. I think Exo Paradigm Gamer had a really great series sort of studying these stages, doing tons of different runs of them and these experiments to figure out how long it takes with and about the hints. I recommend you look it up. Just look up Exo Paradigm Gamer Knuckles stages, something like that. You'll find it. And while we're still talking about the Knuckles and Rouge stages, I believe they benefited most from the decision to make every level its own purpose-built stage for the character rather than what Sonic Adventure 1 did, but again, that might have been due to either time constraints, memory constraints, whatever it might have been. The fact that they're purpose-built means that they can get a lot more elaborate. I mean, look at the level you're looking at right now. My commentary is amazing. No, really, you couldn't make this kind of level back into a Sonic level, maybe a mech level if you've made it like a deathmatch. Oh my god, dude, deathmatch with this, that would have been insane. I don't know if the Dreamcast could. No, of course the Dreamcast could have done it. The Dreamcast had freaking Unreal Tournament and Quake 3 on it. No, of course it could have. That would have been sick. They had like a separate deathmatch mode just for the mechs, but they made them really fast or something because that's part of the joy of deathmatch. But still, this sort of level design would not easily translate to any other playstyle, and so the fact that they're purpose-built really allowed developers to just sort of allowed them to get really, really creative and create extremely interesting and elaborate environments. Same with the Tails and Eggman stages. They're not quite as drastically different because they're still linear point A to point B platforming levels, but they take advantage of what the mechs can do a lot better, I feel, especially with the hovering. Although I do find that Sand Ocean in particular is a lot more satisfying to play without the hover nozzle, because yes, with it you can skip a lot of the level design, but man, it's really rewarding when you can time the blocks, the way that you move, just right with Eggman's really heavy jump to just about make it from one to the other. It's risky as hell. In fact, well, actually, I didn't record any of it, but I recently did another Dark playthrough. I'm not sure if I'm actually gonna do a commentary on the Dark playthrough. I feel like I'm gonna end up exhausting a lot of what I have to say about the game right now. But I fucking burned through my lives just trying over and over just to pseudo speed run. I say pseudo speed run because a real speed run would use all sorts of random techniques that I've never even heard of, and would break the game in different ways, and that's really cool too. But I mean speedrunning it to my ability to just playing the level as quickly as I can. And yeah, I died many times because, man, that timing is really fucking strict. Also, I'm not as much of a fan of Cosmic Fall as some other people are, I've noticed. Like, a lot of people really like Cosmic Fall because it does feel like Eggman is unleashed. No, he doesn't become a werehog. I mean, he's not limited as much by gravity and the weight of the machine. I think the floatiness kind of makes it really slow-paced. Maybe it's just me, and the level design doesn't really feel that inspired, but I don't know. It's a fun stage, and it's a cool way to cap off his playstyle, other than the character boss fight. I think that's the last thing you do with Eggman before you take control of Shadow again. And yeah, Final Chase is a bit. It's not as good as Final Rush at all. Like, not even close. I still kind of enjoy it. Those whoop 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 sounds are really fun to listen to, and that's a really good reason for enjoying a level in a platformer, the whoop 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 sounds. But no, it is fun to time your jumps just right on the spinning cylinders and stuff. And you do occasionally get these moments where it's a little more similar to Final Rush, and he had to differentiate it somehow, I guess. Plus Shadow already had his own grind level. That was Sky Rail, which is, I think it was supposed to be a Sonic level, if we're going off of the music and also the, what do you call it, the trailers and stuff. I think there were some images of Sonic in Sky Rail. Although, honestly, the music, okay, we're gonna go back to the music for just a little bit, but the music in Sky Rail, to me, it sounds more Shadow than it does Sonic. It's too dark. Yeah, it has that weird sort of dun-dun-dun-dun-da-da, this really weird bluesy, it's not really bluesy, but yeah, it's this strange, like, climbing guitar part. But all those flat twos and those chromatic they're just way too dark for a Sonic song. Maybe that's another reason why it became a Shadow stage, not just to, no, they would have repurposed the music. But it's an interesting coincidence that if that was meant to go for, if that level was meant to belong to Sonic, another reason why I'm glad it didn't end up with Sonic, because the music was just too dark for a Sonic stage, really. And I know it's kind of weird to think, oh, it's dark. Well, yeah, heavy guitars doesn't equal dark. I'm talking about the music here. It's still really cool. It's a really great guitar part, and man, Radical Highway is just those freaking leads during the, like, I guess the chorus with the riff, and then dun-dun-dun-dun, and we use the drop D. It goes down after he goes. It's something that Avenged Sevenfold ended up doing a couple years later. It's this trick where you play the higher octave, then you let it go. You play the lower open D. And it's just like this contrast and chug down low. People don't really do it in E all that much, but it sounds great in D. Yeah, but getting back to Tails and Eggman stages, I do generally agree from what I've noticed that people think that Eggman's were a better design than Tails. This is a neat little speedrun trick. I'm sure other people have already figured it out, but I felt really cool when I figured it out myself. It makes sense because Tails' levels were rushed, I believe. Again, I talked about this earlier, how Tails was never really meant to be playable, but they put him in anyway, and they did a good enough job. I think his levels are still pretty fun to play. And Eternal Engine's freaking cool. I like Eternal Engine. Not just because the music is incredible, it's so fucking cool. My speakers really, really hate the C that the bass plays at that point in the song. There's this one part where the chord progression when it's going from G to A to C. Yeah. It really hates it. They resonate in a really strange way. It's like it just starts to thump really bad. I don't know if it's just the mix, because it's the only song I've ever heard through these speakers I use, these creative something. I don't know. I think I have the box outside, but I don't know the exact model of the speakers. They're not like ridiculously high-end or anything, but they get the job done. They got some good bass, got some good mids. I use them to mix stuff. Because you don't want to mix with headphones, so headphones lie. And that's actually true. I used to not really understand that phrase, but now I totally get it. Since I do it, I understand. Yes, they will totally fuck up your perception of the mix. But yeah, when it gets to that point in the song, it just it wobbles like crazy. It's like the only piece of music I've ever listened to on those speakers that causes that to happen. It's very interesting, but I always look forward to it though when I play the game through my speakers. I'm always like, oh, here comes the rumbly bass. Which is interesting because it's a higher note than what's happening, so you wouldn't think it would be that way. But other than that, I think it's a pretty fun stage. Avoiding the artificial chaos, especially at the end during the free fall section, can be pretty fun. Sometimes the enemy placement can be a little bit cheap, like with the doors, but that's what repeat playthroughs are for. I'm not sure how good of a justification that is, but pretty much every game to some extent is based around trial and error. That's not a great defense necessarily. I don't think that trial and error should be a big part of any game because it's not always fair, but pretty much every game released after like 1990 whatever doesn't really have too much of a punishment for dying anyway. I mean, lives became meaningless the second that saving became a thing in video games, so really punishment stopped being a thing very, very quickly. Prison Lane, what about Prison Lane? That level it's a really great introduction. It's extremely linear. I mean, pretty much all of them are, but actually, I think I should talk about just the overall... Oh, look at me fucking messing... I've never had to do that before. I've never had to like actually jump on the individual parts like that. But I really should talk about the mech gameplay more as a whole rather than talk about the individual levels, because it really is just... It's a great little break from the speed. And I know that generally you want, like, with a Sonic game for everything to be as fast as it can be the whole time, but I feel like the way this game is set up, especially with the lack of hub worlds, it makes for some really good pacing. I can't imagine Sonic Adventure 2 in any other way. I can totally imagine Unleashed without the Werehog. I can imagine Secret Rings without the shitty motion controls. I can imagine Heroes, but you only play it once, with whatever team you want. I can imagine, I don't know, no, I couldn't imagine Colors without the Wisps. Plus, I like the Wisps. At least I thought they were great for what they were initially. But with Adventure 2, no, I can't picture an Adventure 2 without these different playstyles. And what's interesting is that even though the Tails, the Knuckles and Rouge stages tend to get the most concentrated hate, they do have some very strong defenders as well. But with the Knuckles... Now why do I keep switching the two up? With the Tails and Eggman levels, it's a lot more just sort of like, oh, they're there. But no, I think they're more than there. They're really fun. Just blasting shit. The atmosphere in some of the levels is really good. There's something strangely satisfying about platforming in something that's very heavy. It's almost like, overcoming the odds. When you make that jump, but just when you don't think you're going to make it, it's just so clutch every single time. And hovering around when you get the hover upgrade, is it's just really fun, especially when you find just the right vantage point. I think you saw me way back in Mission Street. You probably saw me skip a decent chunk of the level. Actually, no, I think I messed it up, as in I kind of landed a little bit short and I had to do it the normal way. But you can skip this one huge stretch where you're expected to sort of just hit the spring, or was it to blow up like one of those cylinders and jump on top of it. You can skip that whole part. You can just fly over it. I just got the wrong angle, but I know it's possible because I've done it. I was gonna say I think it's possible. No, I know it's possible because I've done it. You know, this might be a record for me. I've gone 50 minutes without straying too far from the main topic, that being Sonic Adventure 2. In fact, I might actually be able to fill up just the rest of the video talking about this game, which generally is the goal for the series, but you know, if I have to, I'll bust out the other talking points. But yeah, what I wanted to talk about next actually is not so much the individual playstyles, but something I've noticed about the dichotomy between the hero and dark campaign. I'm sure this was 100% intentional on the developer's part, but I feel like the hero campaign is generally a lot easier compared to the dark campaign, considering that, you know, you're probably expected to play through this one first, much like how Team Sonic in Heroes is easier than Dark, but not quite as easy as Amy, although I'm still not sure how I feel about the concept of like the all-female team being the easiest. I get that it was 2003, but what is that implying? That, oh, you're a girl and you want to pick the girls and you gotta make the game easy because girls suck at games, am I right? It just seems kind of... I get that it's a Japanese game, and they have a very different culture there when it comes to that sort of stuff, especially over 20 years ago. God, Sonic Heroes is 20 years old, fucking kill me. But when it comes to Sonic Adventure 2, yeah, it really does make sense. Most people are going to want to pick, unless they're Clement, you know, the great Clement, he picked the Dark campaign first because, you know, Eggman is the greatest scientific genius of them all. Yeah, it is very typical of him. But generally, people pick the good guys first, right? Unless they don't have a choice or something, they make them play as bad guys at first. But yeah, they made the first campaign, the hero campaign, a little bit easier, and this might be a result of the game's development, but I feel like the levels are overall better designed and less gimmicky. I do like it when games get experimental. This was actually one of the points that I had ready in case I didn't have enough to talk about when it came to Sonic Adventure 2. Although, judging by how far I've made it through this video, that might not be necessary. I'll just save it for another video, to be honest, where I have less to talk about. But I've always been a fan of when game devs just sort of, they get a little crazy, they get a little bit gimmicky, but not to the point where it interferes with your enjoyment of the game. There are times when the devs can sort of overstep their boundary, but I feel like with Sonic Adventure 2, they keep it in line. For example, Rouge's stages, they all have some sort of gimmick, but I feel like each gimmick gives the level a nice little bit of sense of identity. For example, the first one, what was it, Dry Lagoon? That's interesting, Dry Lagoon, yeah, that makes sense, but it has this turtle that you first have to rescue, which I think is really cute, which you use to teleport between different locations, and it's a very small little thing, but it kind of gets you ready for this being a different kind of campaign. Then you have Security Hall. No, not Security Hall. Well, yeah, Security Hall, its gimmick is the time limit and the fact that you're collecting the Chaos Emeralds instead, and the switches you have to activate to open up the different doors and such. And then you have, what was that level? Egg Quarters, which not only has its sort of circular setup, but it also has the beetle. And I love how it's just for that level, but Rouge has a unique animation for when she's in the shadow, kind of hiding. Shadows, funny. And Mad Space, well, I can't say I love Mad Space. Actually, I played through Mad Space recently. It didn't take me too long. It only took like 5 or 6 minutes, which for Mad Space is pretty fast for me. Its gimmick is obviously not just the fact that it's massive. I mean, what you're seeing right now is Meteor Herd, and it's fucking tiny in comparison. It's still a pretty big stage, but very small when compared to Mad Space. And its whole gimmick is not just that, but also its hint system, the fact that they're either inverted in meaning or that they're literally backward. It's not a huge deal because you can always pause the game and read them again, but you know, it's just a small little thing. First-time players will definitely be caught off guard by it, but I don't know. Maybe it's impossible for me to judge this game as a first-time player because even when I first played this game, I already had some prior experience, even if it was vicarious, as in I hadn't played it up until that point, but I had seen so much of it that I might as well have. That doesn't seem very fair because, again, 2001, but the internet did exist at that point. Not quite the way it does now, but it did exist, and, you know, fucking, what was it, like Nintendo Power or something, you know, game guys. I'm not saying that's not a justification for backwards design. That's not a defense. It's just the circumstances of the time. It's never going to be 2001 anymore, unless we invent a time machine. Fuck, I want that to happen. Actually, no, wait, then I would be unborn. Ah, damn, maybe, unless, whatever, depends on the logic behind it. So people are always going to have that crutch. And really, I believe that the modern luxuries that we have are beautiful in the sense that they make a lot of older games just much more accessible. For example, if you're playing the original Crash Bandicoot, you think you're going to rely on the save system? The stupid-ass save system the game has? No, you just use save states. Of course you do that. Or, you know, you just play the Insane Trilogy, which, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. It looks really good. And obviously, I don't know about the whole, like, capsule hitbox thing. I played it myself. I didn't have too much of an issue with it. I'm always going to prefer the originals just because, you know, the charm and stuff. But I don't know. It's a solid remake. And obviously, it fixes the save system. Or, speaking of more recent re-releases, I guess the X Legacy Collection. Yeah, it makes X6 actually playable via Rookie Hunter mode. Hell yeah. So if you ever wanted to enjoy that banging soundtrack, but don't just want to look it up, well, you can do that because the game's actually kind of playable that way. It's still, you know, a little more challenging than the rest because of just the way it's designed, but generally you can get by. And I really have no problem using the tools that we have now because it's not like they can be taken away. No matter how hard companies try, they're not going to stop emulation out of nowhere. They're not going to stop. They themselves are never going to stop re-releasing games with these new editions and such. So there's really no point in disregarding that. It's really just a matter of, does the game hold up today? Because I feel like that's far more important than how was the game like back then. And plus, I find that people were generally less critical of games' quality. Back in like the earlier days of sort of journalism, like you wouldn't believe the kind of games that got high scores, which now we would laugh at and be like, well, how the fuck did this get a high score? And there's some others which are total classics and deserve the high scores, but you know, journalism. It can be and still is and has always been a little bit iffy, let's just say. But back to what I was saying about how the Dark campaign can be a little bit more gimmicky, a little weirder, and a little more difficult at times. I think it's to do with, well, obviously, it was 2 of the sets of stages for the Dark campaign were definitely made later in development. Because, again, originally you were only supposed to play as Sonic, Knuckles, and Eggman. So, as far as the Dark campaign goes, Eggman was most likely developed first. And then they had to eventually, oh, fuck, we gotta make, you know, Tails, Shadow, and Rouge. And I imagine for, you know, Shadow and Rouge especially, they were just feeling like taking the engine a little farther, you know, just trying to do some weirder stuff. Like how with Shadow, like every level for his campaign has, well, not every level, but most of them do have, you know, 3 out of 4 have just something that's a little bit different about it. The Radical Highway is a very standard sort of stage. There's not really anything about it, gameplay-wise, that sticks out too much. But let's say White Jungle, it's a time limit. I'm not sure how much of a gimmick that is, especially with how lenient that time limit is. It barely exists. But you've also got these, like, sort of, these vines that catapult you forward. I guess that counts for something. You got the, you know, the heavy emphasis on grind rails and those weird bouncing spring, like, propeller things in Sky Rail. And you got the whoop, 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 fucking, those barrels, the infamous barrels. No, the barrels in Final Chase, and obviously I just talked about Rouge's gimmicks, and I feel like that's really it's a double-edged sword. On one hand, you've already played the hero campaign, at least the developers are assuming you have, so you're gonna want something a little bit different, and because you're a little more experienced with the game. Like, I can play through the hero campaign in an hour, as you can see, a little over an hour, and people who are really good can do it even faster. But I imagine for a first-time player, it'd take quite a bit longer, especially because of Knuckles levels. So at that point, you're expected to have at least a few hours of experience with the game, and so I imagine the developers were a little more inclined to just kind of mess with you a little bit more, and I think that's totally cool. I really do love it when things just sort of happen in a way that, I don't know, not that they wouldn't happen anymore, because, for example, Sonic Frontiers, yeah, it kind of sort of blew us away when a lot of things that you just wouldn't think they would dare to do now, while also, weirdly enough, playing it kind of safe. Open world games they have been in for a very long time now, but I feel like open world platformers haven't really had that much of a place in the mainstream, at least, and I'm really happy that Sonic Frontiers has sort of carved its way in. Not that it's a perfect game, but it's here. Reaching for these new frontiers, it's quite something. And man, that fucking metalcore soundtrack, I was not expecting that. I wasn't thinking like, yes, they're gonna have 9-string guitars on the new Sonic OST. That was sick. I'm so fucking glad they did that, because they know that the people who play Sonic games primarily are like mid 20 to 30 somethings, right? I'm on the younger side, but they know that that's what those kind of people are into generally. So it's like, fuck it, let's appeal to that crowd, right? Let's just get, I don't know why they got Kalen Quinn, I think that's, I don't know how you pronounce his name exactly, but the guy from Sleeping with Sirens, he can actually do some pretty decent screams. He's not the first thing I would think of when I think of metalcore, or more modern metalcore, but to be fair, 75% of fucking metalcore and deathcore vocalists get canceled because they're weirdos, so maybe he was a safe bet, he was a good boy. Yeah, and going back to the Adventure 2 Dark campaign, I noticed something between the two campaigns. The tone and the color palette was very different between the two, and this is probably something that the developers were maybe only partially aware of. The musicians were totally aware of it, I know for a fact, but the level designers and what assets they used, I'm not sure. But I realized that the hero campaign is just a lot more colorful generally. There's just much more saturation in the colors. The levels are just brighter generally. Look at how colorful this shit is right now. You don't see this in the Dark campaign. I find that the Dark campaign is a little more washed out visually. Not in a bad way necessarily. It doesn't look bad by any stretch of the imagination, but if you compare a lot of the equivalent stages for each character, you find that they're just a little more muted in some way. Even in ways that are very subtle. Even when they use the exact same assets, it's the quantity of each asset that is used that makes it appear darker. Even something as simple as the main level gimmick, for example, Final Chase and Final Rush. Final Rush, because of all of the neon, super colorful grind rails, feels way more vibrant than Final Chase does. They use 90% the exact same assets, but because Final Chase has such an emphasis on those dark Xbox green barrels, it feels like a darker level overall. No problem. Not to mention the times when it was 100% intentional on the level designer's part, no doubt. Stuff like Lost Colony, which is just, that's the whole gimmick of the stage, really, is the darkness compared to Eternal Engine. Same assets, but the lighting is so different that it just creates this totally unique atmosphere. And that's actually, I'm not sure if I have time to talk about it, but I love that about Sonic Adventure 2, the fact that every level feels so unique, even when it's technically the same one. Whereas with Adventure 1, it was just blatantly, hey, it's the same level, but you're a different character. Or with Heroes, where it's, hey, it's the same level, but it's just designed a tiny little bit different. With Adventure 2, it took me an embarrassingly long amount of time to even realize that, wow, wait, these are the same levels. These are literally like the same assets and stuff. Just the lighting, the design, the ratio between the use of different assets within the level makes it feel totally different. Oh, and the music. Yeah, different music can't hurt either in creating a very different tone. And so, for example, right now you're looking at Final Rush, and I just said, yeah, it feels very different to Final Chase. The music as well, and the overall pacing of the level, the design, it doesn't feel like the same level. Or Radical Highway and Mission Street, or Security Hall, and what's the equivalent level to Security Hall? I'm not really getting it off the top of my head right now. I guess it would be Prison Lane, but man, it's such a different level. It really doesn't feel like anything else. Or Iron... what was it called? It wasn't Iron Jungle. That's from... No, that's from Shadow the Hedgehog. Iron Prison... Man, I can't believe I'm forgetting. I'm getting old. I'm forgetting my Sonic levels. How is that possible? But still, or Pyramid Cave and all the other pyramid levels. The game really liked its pyramid theme. The only really unique stage per se, I guess, would be City Escape. Even though I'm sure that some of the assets from City Escape were reused for Mission Street, but with slightly different texturing and lighting, obviously. But still, the fact that it's able to do so much with relatively little is to me a testament to the competence of the game's overall design language and, you know, visually and gameplay wise. It feels like such a cohesive and yet unique experience every time, and there's very little of it that feels so blatantly copy paste, because, you know, copy paste is a fact of life when it comes to video games, when it comes to anything. And as a musician, I should know. You have no idea how many times I'll just copy paste. Oh, the same little melody part, move that over there. You know, same chord progression. Or when I do my vocals, if you've ever listened to my covers, you're only listening to about maybe 4 takes out of a billion that I do, and then copy paste those best ones over and over and over again, because, well, you think I'm going to record a unique good take? Good. Emphasis on the good take, right? Unique good take for each part. No, of course I'm not going to do that, because that is... it's possible, but it's a lot more work than I really am willing to put into those kind of, that kind of music, really. If I'm recording like an original song, maybe, but I've never actually done an original vocal song. I don't know, I just don't really have a lot to say about something you'd sing about. But I also don't want to be one of those cringe-ass, like, people who write songs about games in a very literal way. That's really what made, at least early on, because it's more common now for game music to just sort of sound lyrically like vague real-life music that just happens to be in a game. But back when Sonic music was a thing, a lot of the time, as in Sonic music was becoming more vocal, a lot of the time more other franchises would have songs that would directly address the game in a really cringy way. And okay, yeah, Sonic Heroes, fair point, but that's like one out of however many other Sonic songs exist that don't do that. You don't hear, like, you know, Shadow the Hedgehog, Shadow the Hedgehog, yeah, or something like that, right? Or a Sonic and a Black Knight, da da da. You know, that was totally not in key. It's supposed to be in G, but anyway, those kind of things don't happen generally. And back to what I was talking about when it came to the how different the levels feel. And yeah, just overall, I find that the Hero campaign is just more welcoming looking compared to the Dark campaign, which I guess makes a lot of sense because it's the Dark campaign, and it's very subtle, and it's interesting because I'm not sure how much of the development team was really aware of it. Again, I'm sure the musicians were, maybe some of the texture artists were, but again, a lot of the assets are pretty much the same. But it's just these happenstances of the way the lighting was used. Like, for example, White Jungle and Green Forest, how they're literally pretty much the exact same level, but White Jungle has this sort of haze, this fog on top of it, and it really does change the feel of the level completely. And I think that's an incredible feat to just be able to make levels that feel that different while using so few assets. Really, it feels like a much bigger game. And that, I think, is my closing statement here. I can't believe I actually made it for the entire video without busting out any of my secondary talking points. Great, I get to use them for a different video. But yeah, this game feels massive. It's not technically as content-rich as some future games, or maybe even prior. It kind of is a smaller game compared to Adventure 1, but it feels bigger. It feels like a much bigger adventure, but it's very smartly designed, very compact where it needs to be. It's very stripped of bullshit and just feels like such a tight little adventure, but it feels big. That's the thing. It's little, but it feels big. And that is incredibly impressive to me. Like, you got like Sonic Heroes, you gotta beat the game 4 times and stuff, and you do have a fuck ton of levels, and they're all in the same gameplay style, and it's great. And I love Sonic Heroes. But at the same time with this, I just... I don't really know how to put it into words how special it feels. That they were able to just... Because this game was made by like, what, 11 people or something? And obviously it's a Sonic game, so it was rushed. And yet it's larger than life. This is a game that's larger than life. And I just have so much respect for the people who were able to make it this way. Adventure 1 might have been more overall ambitious with more play styles, but again, that doesn't necessarily make it better. I don't like hate Amy stages necessarily. They're not all that fun, but they're also not terrible, I guess. They're just a little slower paced, more methodical. It's, you know, fun whacking Zero with the Pico Hammer, whatever. But the main focus there was really Sonic's campaign. The rest was just sort of there because I imagine they, again, wanted to just show, like, hey, look at all these characters in 3D. Yeah, it's really cool. Okay, enough rambling. I just want to finally express my gratitude to you guys for sticking through with this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, including all of my random tangents that I'll try to keep down to a minimum for the future. But again, it's a learning process, and this is something I'm just really happy to be making right now. Again, thank you so much for joining me for another bit of vivid noise, and I'll see you with the next one.